Hi, friends, and thank you for joining us today for our global chocolate tasting event for our wonderful clients at Presilium Private Wealth. We have a huge group of our favorite people here with us today. We're excited to spend the next hour with you learning about everything chocolate together. We're very grateful to be here with all of you. If you were invited to this event, then you are very important to us. Our life's work is to ensure that all of you reach your financial goals while having an amazing experience with us along the way. Everything we do at Presilium is done with your success in mind. We continue to remain ready to take advantage of whatever the world and the market gives us next, actively working on your behalf each and every day. Thank you for your trust and friendship. Also, thank you for introducing us to so many new clients this past year as we continue to grow. We met so many new, wonderful people last year because of you. Now, I would like to introduce you to our chocolate expert, Dr. Jessica Henderson, who is going to guide us through our chocolate tasting today. Dr. Henderson is a certified chocolate expert who combines her background in neuroscience and group leadership to host fun and memorable chocolate tastings. She has now led more than 500 events, but has assured us that this will be the best one yet. Dr. Henderson, thank you for joining us. We have really been looking forward to today.
Thank you very much, Jerry. I appreciate you having me back, and I don't know if it will be the best one. I will do my best, but it has been specially curated for this group. So this is not my traditional or my typical chocolate tasting. I really put a lot of thought into bringing something for your clients. All right, with that, I've put together a box full of chocolate that really showcases the diversity of what's out there in the world of chocolate right now. It highlights some specific brands in the US, in Europe, and in what we would call countries of origin, which is countries where the cacao tree grows. Typically or historically, before the invention of electricity, people were not able to make chocolate where the chocolate trees grew because they grow in the tropical rainforest. Chocolate bars do not like heat and humidity, so it was impossible. But with the invention of air conditioning, that's happening now, and a lot of award-winning bars are coming out of those countries of origin. So, like every time, I always taste in the order from the most bitter to the most sweet. But before we dive into tasting the chocolate, although it's okay if you cheat, I'd like to have you kind of look at all of the bars in your kit. So we're going to start by just using our primary sense, which is vision. Of all of the senses in our body, vision is the one that has the most brain area associated with it. So when you look at something, you're kind of making assumptions. You might notice some of the packaging is nicer than others. All of the colors are certain colors. There's nothing too bright or jarring. I guess that'd be beyond good. Pink is a little bright. But what you're doing is you're kind of comparing that to all of the chocolate you've ever had in your life, and you're unconsciously having expectations of what you're about to taste. So even before you touch it, before you taste it, you already have some expectations set up. And that's really important. There was a study done on wine at the University of Bordeaux in, I believe, 2021. And what they did was they gave a whole bunch of undergraduates at the wine university, this was not people off the street, some red wine and some white wine, and then some red wine or some white wine that had been colored red. And they asked the undergraduates to describe the wine. And as you would expect, red wine got red descriptors, white got white descriptors, but the white wine that was colored red was also described with red wine descriptors. So a lot of what we actually perceive as flavor is what we expect and what we get from our visual sense. It's the first piece of information we get, and so we tend to weight it quite heavily. And with that, we will start with our dark chocolate bar. So there are 3 plain dark chocolate samples in your kit. The first one is from Lumino. This is the one we're going to start with, but you can go ahead and pull out the second one, which is Beyond Good. And then the third one is actually a little square. It's in the bag. So if you take that out, you'll have a little sample from a company called Toak. All right, so now that we have all 3 of these out, we'll go ahead and start with our first one. So this is what we would typically consider a craft chocolate. To me, the way I define craft chocolate is that at every point along the processing of the cacao beans, which is the raw material for chocolate, to the final packaging, all of that has been done to get the best, most flavor out of those cocoa beans. Industrial chocolate has different goals in mind, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with having a consistent product from year to year. I don't want my Hershey's bars to taste different based on where they were made or what year it is. But craft chocolate does something different, and they want the best flavor possible. And that means because cocoa beans are an agricultural product, maybe they differ from year to year. So the second thing that craft chocolate has behind it is a transparent, traceable supply chain. So on this bar from Lumino, you'll notice you have the word Uganda up top. Now, as far as craft chocolate brands goes, that's not terribly traceable, but at least you know where the beans are coming from. So if you haven't already, you can open up this bar. You're going to crack off a piece, and you should hear a snap when you crack off that dark chocolate bar. That means that all of the chocolate is in temper, and it means that none of the cocoa butter in the cocoa bean, which is the fat, has been replaced with vegetable oil. So it is a sign of quality because you know that it was prepared properly and no shortcuts were taken. The sound of food actually has a lot to do with how we perceive their flavor as well. For example, there is a classic study with potato chips done by Charles Spence in the UK. And what they did was they gave people headphones that kind of moderated how crispy or how crunchy potato chips sounded. And when the crunch was louder, they rated them as fresher and more pleasant. So the sound actually has a lot to do with how we perceive the flavor of any foods as well. All right, if you haven't put this in your mouth yet, bless you if you've been waiting that long. I like to say that you don't eat craft chocolate like you eat a candy bar. You don't spend a lot of money on an expensive bottle of wine or whiskey and drink it like you would a bottle of water. You enjoy the flavors because that's what you paid for. Craft chocolate is the same thing. When you put it in your mouth, maybe chew once or twice, let it melt, move it around your mouth because you're paying for that flavor you want to notice and hopefully enjoy that flavor. Now, whether you enjoy it or not is going to be your personal preference, but hopefully you can notice it's there. So this one has tasting notes on the back of the bar. I tend not to tell people what to taste because I want you to have your own experience. And telling you what I taste or what someone else tastes will kind of change that for you. For example, if I say banana, which is not in this chocolate bar, but then you might taste banana and that will take away from what you would naturally taste. So I typically don't tell people what to taste, but sometimes makers will put them on the back of the bar. So this one is cinnamon and peanut praline. I would call this chocolate an earthy, nutty chocolate. It's it just has a lot of flavors. Different people are going to have different things pop out. You may not get praline. You may get almond. All of that is correct. I also sent in your kit a tasting wheel. If you don't know how to use one of these, what you do is you start at the center and you kind of work your way out. So you would choose one of these large groups of flavors, and then you would kind of work until it's more specific and more specific. This is just a tool that helps you put names to the flavors that you're experiencing. It shouldn't change your experience. You shouldn't use it to look for anything in the chocolate. You should use it just to help you be able to verbalize that to better communicate with other people or to take your own notes if you take notes on your chocolate. I did just a second ago, pull out some other flavor wheels I have. So this is a rather simplified one from Cho Chocolate. Let's see here. And this is from Cocoa of Excellence. All of these are easily downloadable online. I have about 100 chocolate wheels. This one is from the, get it right, International Institute of Chocolate and Cacao Tasting. This is the people that train chocolate tasters how to be judges. And then this one, I think I just got this one recently from Cocoa of Excellence. Again, it's a slightly different one. So the thing that you might have noticed about all of those tasting wheels is they have color to them. I've recently started experimenting with using a tasting wheel that does not have color associated with it, and it is much, much harder. The reason is because, again, we're very visual, and so we are automatically able to identify colors and associate those with flavors based on our past experiences. So I don't recommend taking the color out and printing one of those in black and white. It does not go well. Anyway, so this one is just kind of in the middle of what it's a classic craft chocolate bar. It's a small batch. It's made by a husband and wife team in South Carolina. It's artisanal. It tells you where the beans came from. It has a lot of flavor. It's very lovely. They were at the Northwest Chocolate Festival, right in the middle of it. And it was lovely to meet them both again. So the other two plain dark chocolate bars are kind of on the ends of the spectrum as to what I would call craft chocolate. And I chose them because both companies, so this is the Beyond Good and the Towak, both companies have the same mission, and that is to change the way the chocolate supply chain works, to have some social and environmental change in a positive direction. Both of them are also using a model that puts the production of the chocolate in the country of origin to bring more of the money in the supply chain to the farmers, which is a much more sustainable model. Other than that, they've gone completely different directions. I'm going to tell you, these two products, actually, with a little bit of math and averaging, retail for about the same amount of money, which is unbelievable. We're going to start with the Beyond Good. So this is a company I've been following since they started in 2006. It was originally, I'll bring it out here. It was originally Madagascar. I don't know how well you can see that. That was their original name. That's the French word for the island of Madagascar. This is a 70% bar, and that's quite an old chocolate bar. I keep some old chocolate bars around just to taste them every couple years to see if the flavor changes. Just a personal experiment. But they then changed their name to Beyond Good. They've changed their packaging quite a few times. They just changed their packaging again this year. You might notice this packaging is a little simpler and a little, I would say, lighter than some of the other packaging. When you open this chocolate, if you haven't already, you'll notice that the mold is not as fancy either. So the model that this company has taken is to really get a lot of volume of bars out there. So I'm not going to make you wait much longer. You can go ahead and crack this open, put a piece in your mouth. Everything from the island of Madagascar will taste what I call very red fruit forward. Other people, if you don't like it, you might call it sour. So the words that we're using will just describe whether we find the experience pleasant or unpleasant, but we're all experiencing the same thing, which is some acidity in the chocolate. Because the island of Madagascar is an island and it's locked, when the cocoa trees came over, they were a certain genetic varietal that had that flavor to it. And because they didn't have much mixing with other genetic varietals, they kind of have stayed that way. So anything you get from the island will kind of be that flavor. It's not a pure strain on the island, but it is mostly that flavor. So just to recap, dark chocolate tastes different based on where the cocoa beans are grown because different locations have different genetic varietals of cocoa trees, and those varietals of fruit taste different in the beginning and they have different flavors in the final chocolate product. All right, so this one has an interesting story behind it. It was founded by Brett Bach and Tim McCollum in 2006. And they were originally Peace Corps volunteers. They met, and a couple years later, they started this company. They started manufacturing chocolate in Madagascar. They were using like a small cooperative in rural Madagascar to get their beans from. They really had a lot of trouble getting started because the fermentation and the drying processes of the beans was, I would say, masking the quality of the cocoa beans. So they had to do some training. They had to bring in some equipment. They had to finance all of that. But eventually they got started. As the company grew, the manufacturing facilities that they had in Madagascar could not handle that kind of load. So they shifted some of the manufacturing and eventually all of the manufacturing to Europe. So that's when they kind of fell out of the craft chocolate segment because they were no longer manufacturing chocolate in Madagascar at source. So they were using a large company in Europe to do their manufacturing. The idea and the intention was always to bring the manufacturing back to Madagascar, but they had to build the facility in the same location. So they had to build up. As they did that, they continued to grow. And so they did bring most of the manufacturing back to Madagascar at a different location this time. And almost all of it is there. I believe the last number I saw was in 2020. It was 50% in Madagascar and 50% still in Europe. But I did talk to Tim. We were guests on a podcast together recently, and I think he said it was 80, 85, 86% now, the last he checked. So most of that is in Madagascar. So a lot of people in, I would say, the craft chocolate industry don't really consider this a craft bar because it is lower cost. You also notice it's a larger bar. It weighs more, much like your grocery store products would typically be. So especially when they moved manufacturing away towards a larger manufacturer, a lot of people stopped following Beyond Good. I continued to follow them because I had been with them from the beginning and I knew they had the intention of moving it back. But they pay the farmers a very high premium. They use direct trade. So if you look on your large bar, the very back at the small little thing under the kosher symbol is direct trade. So they took off the fair trade label, and that's actually what the podcast that Tim and I were on together was about. It was put on from the Independent Natural Food Retailers Association, and I believe it's called the Buyer's Desk. But we were talking about certifications and the pressures that puts on farmers, and is it really worth, farmers going through all of these certification processes to sell more cocoa beans or not? Over the years, Beyond Good has had that certification, and right now they don't have it for various reasons. You can listen to the podcast if you want to know more. But they pay the farmers more. They have transparency and traceability, and their goal is, to positively affect social and environmental causes. So I consider them craft chocolate. I'll leave it up to you to decide if you would like to or not. Hopefully you liked this chocolate. It tastes very different from the first one and from the third one. So the third one is a little sample from Towak. So Towak is the most expensive chocolate in the world. I checked this morning, and because it changes with every so often it changes. Their current Master Series bar sells for $490. So with high prices like that, they got a lot of global press, and that led to the company's growth. Their idea behind going in this direction of having an exceptionally high priced chocolate was that they wanted to treat chocolate like whiskey or like art. They wanted it to be a singular and a unique experience. They wanted people to understand that once you have this chocolate, you'll never have this chocolate again. So on all of their packaging, so this is one of their larger bars. This is not the most expensive bar. I think this one is $55. But on here you can see Rain Harvest 2019. So it'll tell you the harvest year, just like a bottle of wine would have a vintage year. We have the percentage, of course, on most dark chocolates. This one is 75 flavors. But then we also have the appellation, the variety, the time that was fermented, the time it was roasted for, and the time it was conched for. So they give you a lot of information. They have this very fancy box packaging. What I sent you was from the mini bar selection. So it also comes in the fancy box. And in here is little squares. And the idea is that you can taste them together. So you have one of three products. The one that I just held up was the 2019. I'm not going to be able to read this. It's 75%. Some of you have the 2021 harvest, which is 75.5%. And some of you have the 2022 harvest, which is 73.5%. Now, I have no idea why they have 0.5%. I get that question all the time. That's just something they do. So the reason that most craft chocolatiers do not like or consider Tawak to be craft chocolate is twofold. Number one, even on the previous box I held up, it said that they were 100% National cacao variety. So National is one of the chocolate varieties that has really good flavor. People thought it was extinct. And using 100% on their marketing is a little bit of a stretch. So the region they get all of their cocoa beans from is called the Piedra de Plaza in Ecuador. And it is a heirloom cacao preservation designated area that those beans have incredible genetics. They have incredible taste. But when they test cacao bean or pods, what they do is they take individual beans and they send them for genetic processing. And that is partly underwritten by Barry Callebaut. I'd like to give them credit for working with HCP on that. But they test lots of different things, lots of different pods, lots of different trees, and only a few of the trees in the large region came back to be 100% National. The other trees were a mix of varieties. So this is our cacao pod. This is the fruit. Inside is the seeds covered in the fruit. The white part is the fruit. So each of these seeds is actually individually pollinated, just like the kernels on your corn. And so they all have a different genetic variety. So even within the same pod, you can have lots of different genetics, not just on the same tree or the same region. So a lot of people find their marketing to be a little misleading when they use the term 100% National, even though there's a large percentage of National in most of those trees, and it's 100% in a few of those trees. The other reason that a lot of people don't consider them craft chocolate is because they do not own the factory where the cocoa beans are roasted and ground and made into chocolate. That is done by Equatoria de Chocolates in Ecuador. It's a large manufacturing facility. They do it to the specifications of TOAC, but TOAC does not own the facility. And although that had to be written on the back of every box, which is how I personally know it, you will not find that information on the internet anywhere. I find it interesting that you can't find that information, but a lot of people also consider that to be a little shady and not transparent. So again, we've got two things on the spectrum here. If you consider the fact that Tawak was actually started with a rainforest conservation program, they were trying to figure out how they could preserve the rainforest. They found some cacao trees and thought maybe we can make chocolate with these cacao trees. This was several years of planning here. I'm making a very short story. But eventually, this is what they did. They pay the farmers well above commodity rates, not just 5 times like your typical craft chocolate maker would, but 10 to 15 to 50 times more than the commodity rate. A lot of the profits from the company go directly into, I think it's called Third Millennium Alliance, which goes directly into rainforest conservation. So they're creating jobs for people in the home country. They're paying the farmers well above commodity rates. They're preserving the rainforest. And again, even though they don't own the factory making the chocolate, I would consider them to be craft chocolate. But I think you can tell I have a rather wide definition of that. There is no accepted definition of craft chocolate. We at the Fine Chocolate Industry Association started a glossary project. It got off the ground, ran out of funding before it can be completed because chocolate is an international product. A lot of people define things differently, and nobody could really come up with an agreed upon definition of what craft was. That's different than the craft brewers who have the Craft Brewers Association have a definition. Specialty Coffee Association has a definition. Artisanal cheese has a definition. fine chocolate has no definition. So you can decide for yourself whether you think these two chocolates on the end of the spectrum fall into what you think craft chocolate would be or not. All right, with that, we will move on to a inclusion bar. So anything in chocolate that is not cocoa beans and sugar is called an inclusion. This is a fun one. It's sort of holiday flavored. I don't think it was meant to be holiday flavored, but it is. This is from Vietnam. And it was two French expats, Samuel Morato and Vincent Moreau, made Moreau in 2011. They were trying to reinvigorate the cacao industry there. They make a lot of different single origin dark chocolates from different regions around Vietnam that taste different from each other. Then they started doing bars like this with simple inclusions. And then they have an amazing holiday collection out, which if you Google it, you can still find some available for sale in the US. This one is mint and orange, and I love this bar. I also have a personal preference. This is not what's best. It's just my personal preference for thin bars, because when you put something thin in your mouth, you have all that surface area and it warms and melts quickly. And so you get the flavor release a lot faster than if you have a very thick bar. So that's just a personal preference. You might prefer a thick bar. Totally up to you. But I love thin bars, even though they do crack in shipping easily. And then this one, mint and orange. The thing about mint is it contains menthol. Now, this is not peppermint. It's not holiday mint. It's regular mint. But all mints contain menthol. And menthol does something interesting where it actually binds to the receptors in your mouth that sense cold. So a change in temperature is sensed by your touch system. So when you put this bar in your mouth, you're getting all of the amazingness of this, I believe, 68% chocolate. You get the depth of flavor from the chocolate. You get some nice orange notes. You get the mint, but you also get a slight cooling sensation. Now, it is kind of subtle. It's not like putting a candy cane or a mint gum in your mouth, but it's there. And that's kind of opposite of a cinnamon flavor or a chili pepper or a black pepper. All of those are what we consider warming or hot spices. Spicy food actually does not make your mouth hotter. It feels hotter because they're activating, once again, the touch receptors in your mouth that respond to warmth, heat, change in temperature. So just as a recap, we have the jelly beans. As always, what I normally do with the jelly beans is have you choose a jelly bean that is not red and hold your nose, chew the jelly bean a few times, then release your nose. And what happens is when you're holding your nose shut, you are only using your 5 taste receptors: sweet, salty, sour, bitter, and umami. And so all you get with Jelly Bellies is sugar. I do this purposely because all you get with Jelly Bellies is sugar. As soon as you release your nose, you get all of the aromas from the air that's in your mouth as you breathe out. Again, fancy word is retronasal olfaction, but you're smelling the air in your mouth. I like to use Jelly Bellies, even though you can use chocolate, because they're simple and it's intense. The flavor is intense. I always tell people not to choose the red Jelly Belly because some of the red Jelly Bellies are cherry, but in this mix that goes into the little pyramid, some of them are cinnamon. And if you get the cinnamon Jelly Belly, you feel that in your mouth, so you'll actually get some of the flavor before you release, which is the opposite of the mint, which is what we just had in the chocolate bar. So when we talk about flavor, a lot of times people like to think of it as just taste, but flavor is, we already talked about the visual system that sets up your expectations. It's the sound of the food. It's the feel of it in your mouth. It's the taste and the aroma. And I did forget to mention, I was going to mention this too. One of the Charles Spence, who's the one that did the potato chip experiment, also did an experiment with opening beer cans. He went to a beer festival and gave a talk. And what he did was he played audio of different sounds of people opening beer cans and asked people if they could tell which beer was fresh and which beer was stale. And all of the participants got it 100%. So again, what we hear is really important to the flavor of the foods that we enjoy. So we're going to sort of backtrack sort of not. We're going to go with this lovely Presilium branded bar here. So when I got this bar and I turned it over on the back, it said dark chocolate as the first ingredient. And then after all of the parentheses, it said milk. So at first I thought it was a dark chocolate and then I realized it was a milk chocolate. But either way, in the parentheses, the first ingredient is sugar. So this is a sweet bar. I expected it to be sweet based on that, and it was. And just so you know, I actually tasted the bar before I read the ingredients. I always try to taste things blind because, again, once you have expectations, they affect what you think the flavor is. Quite sweet. So then I was like, oh, I wonder what's in here. This one, I wanted you to taste on its own. Kind of get your ideas about what flavors are in there. You can use your wheel if you like. But what I really wanted you to do was taste this one and then immediately go back and taste the first one we had. Ooh, I'm gonna lose my chocolate. Go back and taste the first one. So if you tasted the first one, you had an idea of what flavors were in that chocolate and how sweet it was. If you taste something really sweet right before you taste this first one from Uganda, it will change your perception of the bar. I'm going to give everyone a chance to do that. And I also want to say that there is absolutely nothing wrong with liking sweet chocolate. We are all born loving sweet foods. Sugar is really important to getting enough calories to sustain our really active brains. So sweetness and sugar are something that we all like. This bar is much more in tune with what you would think of as a chocolate bar. It has the sweetness, it has the roasted flavors, it has the milk to make it creamy. And all of this is just your own perception. So I can't tell you where the cocoa beans came from, but a lot of times when we judge chocolate, it comes down to, do you want to put another piece in your mouth or not? So if you like this, please enjoy it. If you like candy bars, please enjoy candy bars. All right, so hopefully everyone's had a chance to do this. And the reason that this happens is because your sweet receptors on your tongue are incredibly sensitive to be, or incredibly in tune to being desensitized. So desensitization is a process that happens across all of your senses. For example, I like to say, if you are sitting in a room, you walk into a room, you might hear your refrigerator humming, or if you're in a room, you might hear the air conditioning, or the heat in this case, click on. So you might notice a change. However, you get used to it really fast and you just tune that information out. When you put your socks on in the morning, you feel they're on, you feel them on your feet, you're good to go, and you never think of your socks again the rest of the day. And that's because if we paid attention to all of the information coming into our bodies with all of our senses all the time, it would be complete overwhelm and we wouldn't be able to do anything because there's so much information that we filter it constantly. So when we taste something really sweet, our sweet receptors are like, okay, there's something sweet. Now we're not going to respond to sweet anymore. So when you taste something else that's less sweet, you're not getting the same response, and the sweetness almost disappears in the first bar if you taste it directly after this one. And that's also the reason that when I lead a tasting, I always lead it in the order from the most bitter to the most sweet. If you go backwards, sometimes those first bites of the bar that you've gone backwards to just aren't as good as you remember, or won't be as good as they should have been. So if you're watching this later, or you're tasting bars later, you can taste, you can skip bars, you can taste out of order, but never go backwards, unless you want to have a palate cleanser in between. All right, so on to some more milk chocolates. This one, I was so worried that I would not get to put in your kits. French Broad is one of my favorite chocolate companies. I was following them before they were chocolate makers because I went to their lounge in Asheville, which is in North Carolina, where I am. This was founded by Dan Radigan and Jael Skeffington. In 2008, they opened their chocolate lounge. They were chocolatiers. They were using pre-made chocolate to make delicious chocolate desserts. That's when I found them. They started making their own chocolate in 2012, and they did use that direct trade model again. If you go onto their socials or their website, you can see a lot of information about where they get their cocoa beans from. They have three different milk chocolates. So they have dark milk, which is not a legal term. It just means that it's a high percentage of milk. They have malted milk, which is this one, and they have brown buttermilk, which is kind of a caramel one. So this is the one I chose to put in your kits, and I went ahead and put in an order. And before they could ship the order to me, Asheville was hit by that horrible hurricane that wiped everything out. The French Broad factory was actually sort of spared. They put sandbags up on their doors. The water went slightly over the door, the sandbags, like at the door handle level. So they got about an inch of water in their factory and their, tasting room. And of course, they didn't have electricity for clean water for quite some time. However, they had a distribution center that was off-site and was not affected by the hurricane. So they were able to ship out the chocolate. They shipped it to me. I was so happy I could put it in your kits because it is a really unique milk chocolate. After that, once they were able to kind of get back on their feet, get resettled, make sure everyone they loved was safe, they did, tell people if they wanted to support French Broad, please just buy our products. That's the best thing you can do. Their distribution warehouse was sold out, I think, in like 3 days. They weren't able to get back to production for a couple of weeks. But they are constantly just putting new things on the website and then selling out, constantly putting it on, selling out. So there was a lot of community support for them. And of course, I emailed them and asked how I could help. So I'll be buying lots more chocolate once they get production back up and running after the holidays. So I hope you like this one. It's a little different than your typical milk chocolate. I wanted to put something in there that you wouldn't necessarily find in your local store. If you like the flavor of malt, I hope you'll like this one. And then our next one is a very similar story. This one is a father-daughter duo, Chris and Joanna Brennan. They were bakers in the UK. They were, again, chocolatiers. They were buying pre-made chocolate and putting it into all of their pastries, croissants, breads, cakes, pies, all of that kind of thing in 2010. They became chocolate makers in the same year, 2012. And apparently they're very good at making chocolate because they make quite a bit of it now and ship it all over the world. The original bakery is still standing, and they put their baked goods into their chocolate now. So when I was first introduced to Pump Street, it was not one of their single origin dark bars. It was their bread bar. People kept telling me, you have to try this bread bar. It's really good. And I thought, bread and chocolate, that's a little weird. This was several years ago when inclusions were just becoming a thing. So I tried the bread and chocolate. I was blown away. I loved it. So that is the dark chocolate has sourdough bread in it. They also have a milk chocolate with rye bread and a white chocolate with brown bread. Those were like the three core chocolate bars with bread products in them for a long time. And then they had some specials over the holidays. Well, in the last 2 years, they've decided to expand what they're now calling the bakery series. They added some of the holiday bars to their regular lineup. And then they have a new bar, which is called Cookie Chip. So I, again, of course, tried this. Anything new they come out with now, I have to try. And I loved it. And I'm super excited that it arrived on time to get in your kit. So this is Cookie Chip. The beans are from Ecuador, Hacienda Victoria. So same country as Towak, but completely different location. And then you have that 60%. They're calling it, again, a dark milk. That, again, not a legal term. That's just to indicate that it has a high percentage of cocoa beans in there at 60%. It has milk powder. And then, of course, it has those delicious, crunchy cookies, which I absolutely adore. I'm surprised that this singular bar has lasted as long as it has. I'll really be enjoying that probably as soon as this webinar ends. I have two other things in your kit for you. I'm going to go a little out of order here. So I don't have any negative thoughts towards chocolatiers. Chocolatiers use pre-made chocolate to make absolutely delicious products. I think it's a completely different skill set than being a chocolate maker. And there's nothing inherently better or worse about being one or the other. So sometimes I work with a chocolatier in Oregon called Wildwood Chocolate. They make, I feel bad showing to you this beautiful bar, but they make these absolutely gorgeous bars. They they're very delicate. This one is filled with caramel. And so what I did was last time I made an order of the floral bars, I just ordered a whole bunch of caramels as well. And I threw this in your kit just kind of as a fun aside and to remind me to tell you that there's nothing inherently different about a chocolate maker or a chocolatier value. This one is the honey cardamom. And I put it almost at the end here because it is quite sweet. But I'm used to having caramels that just have that rich caramel taste. And this chocolatier is really good at making caramels with spices that don't overwhelm the caramel taste. I think the honey cardamom is my favorite. If you like rosemary, they have an amazing rosemary caramel. It's very strong, so you're definitely going to have to like the flavor of rosemary. But I also like the chai, and their bars are absolutely delicious, even though they're not grinding their own beans. So you might want to take a little palate cleansing break because again, you just had something very sweet. And now we're going to go to something that is sweet, but not quite as sweet as the caramel. So our last one is a vegan white chocolate, which is legally not a thing that exists. White chocolate is defined as cocoa butter, milk powder, and sugar. So there are a lot of craft chocolate makers out there who are really trying to appeal to people with dietary restrictions or preferences, and they're making creamy bars that don't have dairy milk. A lot of them are very, very good. Some of the oat milk bars that I've tasted, you don't know that there's oat milks in. A lot of the almond milk bars, they're not particularly nutty, but you get a little bit of nut flavor and they're delicious. I would say the coconut milk bars, almost all of those, you are going to taste the coconut, but if you like coconut, that's a good thing. So chocolate makers are doing an amazing job with those types of products. This one, and then what they're trying to do is make white chocolate without dairy. The problem is that you can't really describe to customers what it is without calling it white chocolate. It's because it's a vegan. So this says vegan white chocolate, even though that's completely not legally a thing because it does not have any dairy in it. This is colored green and it has a chocolate waffle cone in it. So this is, I think, really a fun bar, and I think it's nice to end a holiday tasting on. It's peppermint flavored, so you're going to get that slight cooling sensation. And I don't want to read the ingredients for you and spoil it. When they do these bars replacing dairy milk, they do use lots of different things. So if you have an allergy, you might want to read it. But otherwise, I say enjoy the chocolate, just like I do. Then read the ingredients and figure out what's in it. What are you tasting? This is a nice way to end here. There was one other thing I wanted to talk about Toak, since we have some time at the end here. So a lot of people really feel strongly about the price point of Toak bars. So not all of their bars are $500, just the one that's like the one on top. They have another line under that that's in the $200 range and another line under that that's in the $55 range. So a lot of chocolate makers will actually buy the $55 bars. Not chocolate makers, chocolate retailers will buy that one because when they put a $50 bar on the shelf next to a $20 bar, it makes the $20 jar look like a bargain. When the 20 is the most expensive next to the 10s and the 8s or the 14s, and the 20 looks really high. But suddenly this kind of shifts everybody's expectation about what chocolate costs. And most of the retailers that I've spoken to say it works wonders, and they sell a lot more of their higher priced bars that otherwise people would be, intimidated to buy or just wouldn't feel like that was a good value. So this goes on a lot of shelves. But I also really believe that when you pay a higher price for something and you believe it has more value, you actually do get more enjoyment out of it. That would apply to whatever you think is a luxury item. So there was a study on wine again because they do a lot of studies in the wine world, more so than the chocolate world. But this one was done in 2008. And what they did was they gave 20 subjects, which is not a large study, five different wines. They gave them sips of wine while they were laying in an MRI scanner. And they asked them to rate the wine, and they measured how much brain activity they had in the reward centers of their brain. So the wines that were higher priced were actually rated as more pleasant by the people in the MRI scanner. And then the activity in the reward part of the brain, it's more complicated than that. It kind of pains me to say it so simply, but we're going to say the reward part of the pathway of the brain, the activity was higher when people were drinking higher priced wines. The little trick to the study was there was not five different wines. There was actually three. Two of them were presented twice at a high price point and a low price point. And of course, this is a well-designed study, so they presented them all in different orders, and they accounted for that. But the thing is, when you even have the same exact product, when somebody thinks it costs more, they actually not only rate it as more enjoyable, but they get more reward from it in a biological sense. So a lot of people really put down TOAC for putting those expensive bars out there. They're talking about customers wouldn't want to buy them, etc. But I would say that when you have something that you have that much of value to, and that you feel has that much value, it is that exactly what they're trying to produce is that unique experience that you'll never have again, because once that chocolate bar is gone, that 2019 harvest, it's gone forever. That also applies to all of the other chocolates that we've had. I'm not going to pick them all back up. It does apply to all the other chocolates. Once you've had that chocolate bar, the next batch will not be the same. So you're still having that unique experience. With that, I just want to end by saying I hope that you enjoyed this presentation. I never want to tell anyone what to think, what to like, what to buy, but I hope I've given you a lot of new information that you can use to make those choices for yourself, and I hope you enjoyed the chocolate. With that, I'll open it up to questions.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Jessica.
Yeah.
Your presentation was amazing, and as a chocolate lover, I look forward to adding some of these new varieties to my regular rotation. And thank you, everyone, for joining us today. We love spending time with you while learning something new, especially something as interesting and delicious as that was. Thank you for continuing to watch and share our videos. This chocolate tasting will become the 250th video on our website and YouTube channel. We now have a video posted on almost any financial topic you can think of. We love working with you every day and hope that you and your family have a wonderful holiday season. Thanks, everyone.